Another major difference between men and women is their noses. The male's nose is often wider and has a more pronounced bridge, and they also have a more broad eyebrow area. So what we do is the nose, we can draw or shade in a little bit here, but you'll notice that I'm doing it much wider than I did when we did the female's face. And on one side, I often connect it to the eyebrow. Sometimes I do both like this, but I usually just do one. But you can do both if you want to. And what I do afterwards is here, because I want to show people that the eyes are sunk in and that the person has, an eyebrow that sticks out. I often do a little bit of shading here, and I do a little bit here. Very little, but just enough to hint that the eyes are sunken in a bit more. Another thing we can do for males is, remember for the female we erased most of the cheekbone, okay, but using the guidelines that still should be there, I'm just slightly reshaping them and putting in a cheekbone. Now, not all men have cheekbones, and it just depends on a variety of factors, but for this guy here, I'll make them fairly pronounced, and I might shade in a little bit here just to emphasize the fact that they are quite pronounced. Some men also have lines here, and they tend to be found on older men, but not always, it depends. You can also add in this little cleft here. Okay, you can shade it just to imply that it's there. And then right below the mouth, some men have a pronounced chin. Okay, but again, maybe just shading a bit to imply that it's there might be all you really need to do. Going back to the eyes, I forgot to put in eyelashes, but with men, their eyelashes are often not as long, and I tend to draw them a bit more straight than I would in a woman's eye. So keep the hairs short and a little bit straighter, and if you want to do some on the bottom too, but these ones I usually do very faint. When we did the neck of the woman last day, I got you to measure down from the edge of the eye, but if we do that for the man's head, the neck will be way too thin. So I usually tell people halfway between the eye and the edge of the head, right around here, you can draw a line down, and that should be a good place to put your neck. And again, don't use a straight line, maybe make it taper gently in, okay, but not too curved either. It has to be still somewhat straight. Okay. And below the chin here, men have what's called an Adam's apple. You can draw it in if you want. I usually just shade a little bit just to imply that it's there. The hair is next, and just a reminder, remember this egg-shaped part that we see here is the scalp. Doesn't mean that's where the hair ends, and it doesn't mean that's where the hair starts. The hair would actually go above it and underneath it. So usually what I do is I decide what kind of hairstyle to give the man, and I just kind of pencil in roughly where it goes. Okay, so I'm just using a dotted line right now, but the hair has to go above and beyond the scalp, depending how much hair and how thick and how much volume it has. Okay, but just kind of plan it out and then sketch out the overall shape. Okay, and this part here, I've decided to give this man a widow's peak. That's when you see the front of the hair and it has a V shape. We call that a widow's peak. And later on I'll also give this person sideburns. So the sideburns will come down to a certain point. There we go. Once you've got the hair planned out, you can bring out an eraser and remove the egg shape guideline. So we already know the shape of the hairstyle, and for a guy, often the hair is shorter, and that's why right now I'm using short hairs. I'm using very short lines, and I'm drawing the short lines in a direction that the hair would point. Okay, this is quite a lot different than last day when I showed you how to draw a woman's hair. For a woman I used long flowing continuous lines, but because this haircut is a short haired haircut, I have to use shorter lines. And you'll notice here, as I'm getting to the side of the head, I'm changing the direction the hairs point, because the hair will now point at an angle aiming downwards. And so I'm changing the direction depending on which zone of the hair I'm drawing. And when I get down to here, I'm in fact using lines that almost point straight down. I've done one side already. I'm just going over to the next side. And again, this is somewhat time consuming, but I guarantee you, if you're patient and you don't take any shortcuts and you draw the individual hairs, it'll look so much better than if you just shaded it all in or made it solid or just scribbled. So as I'm approaching the end of the hair, I'm almost done. You can just double check that you didn't leave out any patches. Everything should have enough hair. And down here, you can do little short tiny hairs to make sideburns. Now that I'm done the hair, I'm going to go under the chin here and just add a bit of shading, because that's where shadows will be. And it depends on the lighting, of course, but you might want to just check which direction the light's coming from and put in enough shading. So one side might have more than the other, but okay. I'll just use my finger to smooth it out. Okay, don't be afraid to get your hands dirty. Okay. And the last thing you can do, if it still doesn't look like a man's face, you can always add mustaches or you can even add tiny little hairs to form a beard. And then the last thing is the lips. I'll add some little faint lines to show that there's some texture there. And just touch up a couple of things. Now that I'm done, you can see that this is a man's face, and it looks significantly different than the woman's face that I did the last class. We started with the same template and the same basic steps, but with some important differences, we were able to make this face more masculine. So that's the end of today's lesson. I hope you enjoyed learning how to draw a man's face, and now it's your chance to try it yourself.